Why is President Donald Trump's takeover of the White House press corps such a big deal? I'm here with Dan Lothian, the editor-in-chief of GBH News and The World, to talk it through. We should mention, by the way, for people who don't know your history, you were CNN's White House correspondent.
That is correct, for 5 years. So right at the end of the Bush administration, and then the first full term for Obama, and 1 year into his second term.
Now we have President Trump saying that the White House is going to handle who gets to cover the president when, who's going to get the most intimate access, who's going to be allowed into the briefing room, for example, when he meets with President Zelensky of Ukraine. Do you see this as a big threat to press freedom?
I think that any time you can open up the process of who gets to come into the briefing room, or who gets to get space at the White House, or who gets to be at any of the events that formerly were only open to traditional reporters, I think that's a positive thing. I mean, I remember when we started having blogger types who were coming to be part of, the White House, cover the White House, and they had little desks for them where they could sit. And I remember thinking, like, what are these bloggers doing here, right? Mm-hmm. And then bloggers turned into, some of the websites and the different things that became traditional within the White House. So I think, generally speaking, it's always good to open up all of what is being done by any administration to a broader group of people. Having said that, I also think, what is the purpose of doing it? If it's just really to open things up, then that's a good thing. If it's to only get a certain voice, only more people who would be more favorable to what you are doing, then I think that's troublesome. Or if it is to punish someone because of something that they did, that also isn't something that I would think is good for any administration.
Well, and as we try to connect the dots, it does seem like the things that you're concerned about are the things that are happening. We have the Associated Press being kept out because they will not fully embrace the Gulf of America moniker that President Trump wants people to go with. They'll call it the Gulf of Mexico, but acknowledge that he's calling it the Gulf of America. I believe Reuters may be being excluded right now as well. And then you've got people like that guy, Brian Glenn, who popped up in the Zelensky conference. I don't want to get it wrong here, I think his outlet is named Real America's Voice. And he's the one who asked this very combative, insulting question of Zelensky about the clothes he was wearing. Yeah, so if you have outlets like AP not being included, and if you have outlets like Real America's Voice being brought in apparently to act as partners in this humiliation, in this particular case, of a foreign leader, then the picture starts to look, at least to me, kind of ominous. I don't want to be overly dramatic, but am I being overly dramatic?
I don't think you are. I mean, any time that something is jarringly different from what we're used to, then you have to look at it with a critical eye, right? Why is this being done? Well, it seems to fit into this bucket, so it must be that. And I think if you compare it just to the way that we have operated in the past within a nation that has and is very proud of having a free press, then those are the things that I think make a lot of people concerned. However, I will also point out that crazy stuff happens in every single administration. And there is, maybe not at this level, but there is some of the, hey, if you do that, we're not going to let you do X. For example, I remember there was a time that I had asked a particular question to Robert Gibbs, and it was about whether or not President Obama had bowed to the King of Jordan. And I don't even remember that, right?
I remember that event.
And so he and I were kind of going, back and forth on this. I had asked a question in the briefing room. He basically tried to make me look silly in asking that question. I then later confronted him. I wrote a little write-up on it, which he didn't like. And what did he do? He iced me out. So normally there was a way that we got called on. There was an order that we got called on for our questions. Mm-hmm. The traditional news organizations across the front row, you started with the AP, you kind of moved around, and he just skipped right over me.
How long did that go on?
It lasted for almost a week. And then I went in and challenged him, and eventually I got out of timeout. And it was, so these are little things that it always happened behind the scenes, or Rahm Emanuel one time giving me the middle finger because he wasn't happy with something that I had
Really?
that we had just reported.
Do you remember what that was?
I don't remember what the story was. I just remember that I had just reported out on the North Lawn. I was walking back to the area where our little office is there at the White House. I heard a thumping noise, and I looked, and he was in the press secretary's office banging his middle finger against the window.
Wow.
So these kinds of things, I've never actually said that publicly. I've told that story privately, but that's good.
That's a great anecdote.
Yeah, I think
especially that he was thumping on the window.
He was thumping, right. I remember he was missing a digit from an accident, and so it was very sort of dramatic. I wrote about it in my diary with a lot of detail. But what that shows is that there's a lot of this kind of thing that goes on behind the scenes. The difference is that it's all playing out here. And certainly you could say, to more extreme, it's playing out in this administration. But the public shouldn't just think, oh, this is the first time that an administration has ever ganged up on a particular news organization or the press in general. That kind of thing has happened. Again, I'm not saying that the same thing happens at the same level, but there is a lot of craziness that happens behind the scenes.
Can you give people who might not understand how it works, or might have a limited understanding of how it works, a sense of what the White House press pool, I guess what it was back in the day that you were part of it?
Right. Well, two things. I mean, I think you have the general White House press pool, which is anyone who pays in to the association, and so they obviously are the ones who will travel with the president. They get credentials for different kinds of events that happen both in and around Washington or even on the road. And then you have a tighter pool of reporters who always travel with the president, no matter where he goes. If he's just running out to get a burger, traditionally, this pool of reporters would travel with the president. And the main reason for that is not certainly to get for editorial reasons, but it's also to make sure that cameras and reporters are there for history, right? To be able to document all of these things that happen in the day in the life of a president, even if it's something that's quite mundane or it's something that's more official, all of that has to be documented. And so when you go out on pool day, then you have to provide information for everyone who's part of the White House Correspondents Association. So if I'm the person going out on that day on the pool, then every single movement I am sending back then on my BlackBerry. It's like we're departing the White House, 5 minutes away from destination. We have arrived, and maybe a quick note about what we saw when we arrived.
If you're on Air Force One with the president, what kind of stuff goes on? Is it off-the-record conversations where the president will approach the members of the media who are traveling with him and maybe share some things that you're not able to put out there in the press? Is it unusual on-the-record insight? Is it a combination of those and some other things too?
It can be a combination of those. It's usually off the record. And believe it or not, Obama took forever to come back and talk to reporters on Air Force One. It had been many months of traveling with President Obama before he decided to stroll back and actually have a conversation with reporters. And a lot of interesting things are said that are never reported. I'm thinking about some wonderful conversations with President Obama about how he felt about people who were running against him or had challenged him in some way. All of it off the record. So you might say, well, what do you do with this information, right? And the importance of that is to help you understand how the president's thinking about something. So on the one hand, he may come out and say, well, we had a very frank and honest discussion. What you know is that he hates their guts. And it's more the negative than the positive. So you are able to gain a lot of things. Plus, it helps you ask the right questions. If you know the president's thinking about something, you can frame your questions in such a way that you can get something on the record
So
later.
it infuses your reporting indirectly as time goes on. Okay.
Exactly. You know what to ask, right? And if you know the president feels a certain way, sometimes you might try 5, 6, 7, 8 different ways to get at that information on the record by raising interesting questions to people.
All right, closing question for you. If news organizations that are part of covering Washington believe that things are going in an extremely bad direction, for example, if there's a commonly held sentiment that AP really needs to be part of the press pool, they're being kept out, we shouldn't allow this to go on, or that you're getting voices, more sycophantic voices, like the guy who asked Zelensky about whether he owns a suit, or people who seem to be there to act as partners in the event, the great TV that President Trump is always looking to make. What's the right thing for legacy media organizations to do? Would it be going too far to suggest that CNN, the Washington Post, the New York Times, other outlets could actually boycott if they don't like the way things are going? Say, okay, you're doing this wrong. We're not going to accept our access anymore.
Right.
We're going to show you that we're serious. Or is that a step too far?
I think that's a decision they will all have to make. I know that in the past there were times where if one organization was treated a certain way, then everyone would kind of gather together and say, no, we're all in this together.
Under
right?
Obama, right?
Under
With the
Obama,
Kenneth
right.
Feinberg interview,
Exactly.
and Fox wasn't going to be part of it, and everyone else said, no.
Everybody always stood up for each other. But these are different times, right? So I think there will be some networks that would maybe gather together and decide we're just not going to, if we can't all cover it together, then we won't be part of it. There will be others who will say, but we have to do this because we need to be there, not only for general coverage, but also for history, to make sure that if we feel that something nefarious is going on, at least we're there to document what the real truth is.
That'd be a tough call to have to make.
That is a
tough
tough
call. If you feel
call.
like things are going again in too sycophantic a direction,
Right.
you could make a case that you exacerbate that process if you give up your access.
You're right. I don't know that there's an easy answer to this. What I will say is that I remember when I first went to cover the White House, and I ran into, how do you get around the talking points? Every day, the White House has the talking points. It's the reason why when, at least it's the way it used to be, the president would say something and then you're doing an interview up on the Hill somewhere and there's somebody up there who says almost the identical thing, and then you're talking to the secretary over there and they're saying almost the same thing. They decide what they want the narrative to be for that day. And the challenge for us was always, how do we break through that? How do we find the real story of the day and not just follow the line that the administration wants us to follow? And so the advice I got at that point is, don't think that the White House is the only place that you can do your reporting. You're covering the White House, but you may not be able to get what you need from the White House. If you go up to Capitol Hill, there are a lot more people. That's the place where you can find leaks. And so you need to get out of the White House. You need to go to Capitol Hill. You need to go to different agencies. You need to knock on doors. That's the way that you get to the real story. So again, it's not to diminish what is happening here, but I think the public should be aware that there are other ways that we can still continue to cover the administration in a very honest and forceful way, even if you're not getting into, or you choose not to be part of these more formal gatherings at the White House because of what's going on. That doesn't mean that you won't be able to cover the administration.
Dan Lothian, thanks for talking this through. Fascinating stuff, and I love the anecdotes.
Yep, pleasure to do it.